Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Be Better podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Perkins. Today's episode is called Be Better with the Social Television Network. The mission behind the Be Better podcast is for people to think about life a little deeper. All right, we have the managing director, Eric Sperling, here from the Social Television Network. How's your Saturday going, sir?
It's going good so far. Good to see you again, Anthony. How are you?
Doing great. Good to see you again. I appreciate our first conversation and meeting.
Yeah,
And I wanted to have you on as a guest because people need to know about the social television network and what it offers. So thank you so much for doing this and the knowledge you're about to share.
no
So let's start
problem.
with the $1 million first question. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, especially that kind of life changing accident at age 18.
Sure. So, yeah, you mentioned age 18. 18 was kind of an interesting year for me. I was a football player in high school in California, San Jose, California. And I'm not sensationalizing this, that I had 8 concussions playing football. And my last concussion was one that I really didn't recover from. And neurologists call it post concussion syndrome. And what that basically means is you have the symptoms of a concussion that linger on weeks, months, even years after that. And so towards the end of my senior year, I was really struggling. I was a 4.0 student. I was a dedicated student, student athlete. And within, 6 months, I was a completely different person. Because what happens is those concussion symptoms, whether it's like dizziness or loss of memory, ultimately it affects your brain chemistry too. So I really struggled with depression shortly after, and had this moment, where I kind of called it. I just physically couldn't do it anymore, and did the old, left a note for the parents, and where I'm in California, so I drive up the coast, and this is right by Santa Cruz, and I find a cliff there, and walk to the edge of the cliff, and had that moment, looked down, saw the water splashing on the rocks, and and the hard thing was I was in that moment, and there was really nothing like wrong with my life. My family was great. My friends were great. It was just physically what I was dealing with. I just couldn't see myself living like that anymore. Where I mean, I couldn't even hold a job. I couldn't count change, which was crazy to me. I was at a local gym. I was trying to get a job at a gym, and I was working the front desk, and it was too overwhelming for me. And so I had to just be. I was the guy who cleaned the equipment. It gets such a drastic change from where I was like 6, 7 months prior. So I'm standing there, and I'm just, I'm on that cliff, and I'm looking down, and the one, the thing that kind of stopped me was I looked to my right, and there was a family on a beach down below, and there was a little girl there, and all I could really think of was, I don't want that little girl to see what's about to happen. So I just kind of collapsed on that cliff, sat there for hours, and then decided. I had that moment with myself again. I'm 18, and 18's a tough year for a lot of people because you're in transition. But I just decided, okay, I'm going to keep living, but I'm not going to try. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to enjoy this life of alcohol, drugs, partying, and it's easy to find parties when you're 18 years old, and that was every night for me. That's what that was. Really masking what was going on mentally, the struggles with post concussion syndrome. And so it was March of '98 when I met this girl, Lindsay. She's great. We dated, and she said, "Hey, we want to go to the mall one night." And so we hop in the car, and she had one of those. I think it was an '85 Cabriolet convertibles. The ones all the girls wanted from the '80s, all in the movies, but not the safest vehicle. There are no airbags. No airbags in that car. Really, really wasn't something that you wanted to get in an accident with. But anyway, we're on the freeway, and we were playing on the radio. We were doing something. We were kind of messing around with the steering wheel, and she lost control of the car, and we're going 65 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour. And I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that before, where when you lose control and then you go to overcorrect, and she just overcorrected too much, and we went head on into a sound wall at 65 miles an hour. again, no airbags, no nothing. And next thing you know, I'm waking up. The car's on fire, and there is flames in front of me. And there's a good Samaritan who is trying to get me out of the car, and he pulls me out of the car, drags me, out of the car, and a few seconds later, it explodes. I mean, this was like the things you see in the movies where the explosion rocked us, and he had already grabbed Lindsay and got her out previously and dragged her to safety. Um, but being there in that moment, just a few seconds away from death, and there was, I broke my back, busted my face up, multiple other, injuries that weren't as serious. Um, but it was incredible to, and I want to mention his name, Paul Robinson. I still keep in contact with him. We touch base kind of once a year on the anniversary. But the miracle of that night really was, we were unconscious in that car. The car was on fire, and Paulie stopped, and he still tells the story. There are people gathered around the vehicle, and they don't want to rush in to help because the flames were already into on the dashboard and where we were, and people were kind of shouting, "Don't go near it; it's going to explode." And Polly rushed to Lindsay first, pulled her out, and then there are news articles on this. There's a lot of coverage that's still on. We put a lot of it on the YouTube, and he moved the car to get me out. I mean, he had to wedge himself. He's a big dude, between the sound wall and the car while it was on fire because he couldn't open the door, and he moved it, just, I think he said like 10 to 12 inches, just pushing himself against the car in order to open the door just a smidge to get me out. So again, just an incredible event, evening, trauma, story, whatever you want to call it, that took place that night, March 10th, 1998. That really, and I always say this too, like it wasn't like I woke up in the hospital the next morning, like Ebenezer Scrooge, like, woo, I've got a new outlook on life. Let's go. It wasn't like that. It was months later. And anybody who's broken their back knows recovery is not fun because you can't do anything. You're laying in bed for months at a time. And so I'm laying there in bed, and that's where the wave just kind of hit me, the full gravity of what had happened, everything that kind of was going on in my life leading up to that moment, and what happened that night. And then that true feeling of, wow, you've got a second chance, and you're here for a reason. And other people that have gone through, and I've talked with, near death experiences or really traumatic events like that, have had similar transitions in life where, it's not about you anymore. Like, you've been given a second chance, and what are you going to do with it? And so that foundationally kind of shifted me to say, okay, I'm going to forget that person who I was leading up to the accident. I mean, not totally, but just in that moment of the tough things that were going on. And I'm going to um, live out life now as this grateful person who needs to serve, and really needs to live up to the miracle of that night and say, okay, what am I going to do to give back? And I'm truly saying, not living life for myself, but living life to serve, and find a way to do that consistently.
And you call it, which I love and appreciate, post traumatic growth.
Right. There's post traumatic stress, obviously, where the events of something are continually playing in your head, and can take you back to that moment. And it could be, a stressful thing and almost dying. And it plays constantly. It's always going in my head. It's always there. And where the growth part comes in, I always think about, boy, if there's something tough going on in the present moment, or I'm struggling with something, or I'm frustrated about something or worried, that moment is playing in my head and thinking, okay, it could be worse. You could not be here. So it immediately centers me. It immediately grounds me to be able to focus and take on stressful things or see things in perspective where, okay, flashback 25 years ago, and whatever I'm stressing about right now, or whatever thing I'm struggling with, is actually a blessing. And I know that's hard for a lot of people to conceptualize, that when you're going through tough times, or you're going through a stressful scenario, how to see it as a blessing. But I do. I really, really do. I think it could be a lot worse. And I'm grateful for some of the trials that have happened afterwards.
In your story is a great example of storms are just temporary.
Correct. Yep.
Very
And
good. I'm
some
glad you.
last longer than others. You know,
There you
some
go.
some are brief, but some storms are years. But know that there are paths to overcoming that, and I think you're absolutely right. Storms are going to come, but you have the ability to weather it and climb out of it.
What is the mission of the social television network and the opportunities it offers?
Yeah, so STN, our mission is to create a better local media experience. And it does kind of tie back into what we were all just talking about. My background, I went into college for broadcast journalism, ended up being a news producer for a lot of years, different markets across the country. Then I ended up as a sports anchor here in Phoenix. And what I learned, being in that business, being in that industry, um, you and I have talked about this before. If it bleeds, it leads philosophy was really strong. And
Yes, 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 yes.
yeah,
Let's just dive into that because you're about to. That really bothers me. But go ahead.
yeah. If it bleeds, it leads was sort of in our DNA. And it's one of the things I was taught really early in the business. And it was my job. I was the news producer. I dictated what would go on the air every night. It was crazy. I was a young guy, I forgot, I was like 21, 22 years old. And I was the last stop, okay, hey, we need to cover this, or what should we be covering? And you always wanted to, not wanted to, but the way you built your newscast was kind of around what were the most traumatic things going on in your community at the time. And so it really was, if it bleeds, it leads. If we had like a community growth story or something interesting, and we had it as our lead story, and all of a sudden there was a shooting or a fire or a police situation, that immediately took priority, and we would send all our resources to that. So if it bleeds, it leads was the philosophy of local media, local news. And it's not that way for every station, but if you turn on the local news, you'll see it's still pretty present. But STN, our goal is to kind of flip the script on that and put all of our efforts and resources into telling the stories of local leadership, community growth, the solutions in our community. And we do a really good job of bringing all of those people to the table. And we have the resources, the same resources we had with local news. You've been down to our studio. We have a tremendous news studio, broadcast team, storytellers, digital content. So we have all the resources we had in local news, but really changing the mission into, okay, leadership, community growth, actionable solutions, things that really build our community up, instead of spending a lot of time just showcasing you what's wrong with our community.
Awesome. Can you globally reach everyone?
I mean, it's online, so globally, yes. But my background and our background being in local media, we really understand the power of local. And if you download our streaming network, you immediately get this sense of, oh, this is kind of like TED Talks meets Netflix meets local news. But one of the big game changers is it's local people. It's people or you've come in contact with, or you actually have the opportunity to reach out and collaborate with, or partner with, or brainstorm with. And that's going to be the model moving forward for us. Like, our goal is, nail it in Arizona. Arizona's ground zero, but then launch it in other markets similar to what we had in local TV news, where you have an ST in San Diego, or an ST in Las Vegas, or ST in Chicago, and really keeping with that same model of everything you see is local, because what's going on in Chicago is different from what's going on in Phoenix, what's different than going on in Portland. And so the solutions required, the people that are involved in these solutions are different in every single market. So local is very important to us.
We know media can shape people, communities. So, how can we be better with media to avoid misinformation and fake news?
Yeah, I would say media. Think of media almost in the same way you would think of food and how you consume it.
Oh, I love that. Love that.
Yeah. So, most traditional media, mass media, I would say falls similarly in line with fast food. It serves a purpose. It kind of fills you up when you need a quick fix, you need to feel informed. But ultimately, too much of it is not a healthy diet. And, now I'm thinking about some of the things that with social media that are so quick. I mean, it's like the fastest food possible because all you're doing is looking at a headline, forming an opinion with no context whatsoever. And I think that would be my suggestion for anyone who, is interested in having a better media diet is find things that give you more context to a story or find things that allow you to really understand the story as a whole, and you're not just looking at a headline, forming an opinion without really knowing the true nature of that story. And there are so many different platforms nowadays, and I think it's good and bad because you have the ability to get so spread out with your media consumption that you're a little lost in what I think you mentioned fake news and misinformation. But the more that you're able to find media sources that really do spend quality time breaking down issues and are able to give you a complete picture, you'll feel better and you'll be able to grow better. You'll be able to have better conversations in your social circles rather than just saying, "Oh, do you see that article in the news, or do you see that headline?" And then you've created this opinion about a story that you really don't know a whole lot about it, and
Exactly.
you jump on social media and you're sharing things and opinions that you don't know the real story. And I think that's another thing that I knew, or when I was in news, we didn't spend much time breaking down context or really going deep into the issues of the stories we were covering. We had 30 seconds to tell this story, 45 seconds to tell that story. And again, it's sort of like that fast food thing. It works to a point, and then you really do need to find sources of media that allow you to see the whole picture.
Do you ever think in time that the media leadership will, I don't think we'll ever eliminate it, but we will reduce all of that? It leads clickbait media out there, or it's just going to be that's the thing because people love drama.
I think because media operates in the attention economy, and the attention economy means I have to do whatever it takes to get as many eyeballs as I can so that I can sell advertising. Until there are, more organizations, like ours, like STM, like other magazines and outlets that are able to kind of move into this partnership economy model. Where it is more about the stories we're telling and these maybe the smaller audiences we're trying to reach, and less about how many people can we reach. That's where you'll see a little bit of a shift in media consumption and media production. But for the most part, kind of to answer your question, I don't think you'll ever see a war, at least in the near term here, where there isn't local news or local media in its current form. And we're seeing the decline of newspapers. Local TV is kind of following suit, but there's always going to be a need for it in the community. And there's always going to be sort of that drive in the attention economy to keep your eyeballs on our product, so we can sell advertising. That's a model that works very well for many media companies. So until that model stops working, I don't see a major shift for media outlets.
You had used the language growing out of fear in the past. And for our audience, because I like to talk about how to overcome fear, what is your interpretation? What is your philosophy of growing out of fear?
Yeah. So growing out of fear is, for me, it's taking on challenges sometimes where I know I might not succeed, or even us as a company, we might not succeed. But what we'll learn about ourselves, what I'll learn about myself in that process will be so much more valuable to the overall journey than actually succeeding on that one mission or one challenge we put in front of us. And I think, once you start doing that or adopting that philosophy, it becomes easier to take on challenges and take on more risks and be uncomfortable. And I think we all know, right? Like, we only grow when we're uncomfortable.
Right.
And so if you don't have that mindset of like, all right, what's about to happen is going to be uncomfortable. This is a challenge. This is a risk. But putting myself in an uncomfortable position, no matter what, whether I succeed at the end of this or whether I fail, I will have grown. Somewhere inside of me, I will have grown, or if it's a company, we will have grown. And so I think, growing out of fear is just that. It's being able to put yourself in uncomfortable situations, knowing that it's really a win-win situation. You're going to, if you succeed, great. If you fail, that's okay too, because you will have grown somehow, some way in the process.
Very good. Very good. I'm going to ask this next question about uh, because it centers on pushing you off your comfort couch. You had mentioned something. Lloyd, I think Hopkins had challenged you to write a book called "Run to Your No." Are you going to do that in the future?
No chance. Lloyd's always, he's always
Um,
making me do things. He's always challenging me to, yeah, yeah. If there's I mean, you're an author, right? If there's a ghostwriter or somebody that wants to sit next to me and
gotcha.
I can just articulate it, and yeah, maybe that's maybe that's the route I'll go. But
Okay,
no,
how about
no.
this then? What would you, if you were given a quick spiel on "Run to Your No"? What would that be?
Um, I think, it's kind of summing up what we were just talking about is, and Lloyd likes to say it because, when we first met each other, we were talking about certain scenarios where, you know, oh, I don't want to contact that person, or I don't want to approach that organization because I don't know if he said it right, because they're going to say no. And that's where I kind of jumped in. I was like, well, that's what let's get that out of the way first. Go. That's where you will get uncomfortable, where you will get uncomfortable with people telling you no, and then you'll figure out how to get people to tell you yes. So it's one of those things where too many people, I think, they're so afraid of the no. They're so afraid of being rejected or let down, that they don't even take that chance. And I always say, like, be self-aware too, like, be self-aware of what you're asking for. Don't just say, oh, I'm going to take every shot I can. No, make sure that you're calculated in some way of what you're asking for, what the challenge is, but don't be afraid of it.
What would your experienced self say to your younger self if you could go back in time?
Read more. I didn't start reading till I was after 30. I was 31, I think, when I finished my first book, and I think there's so much knowledge and wisdom out there. I think, in some of us in our early 20s, or when we're early in our careers, maybe we think we know it all, and we think we're so tunnel vision into ourselves and our career paths that maybe just taking in a little bit of knowledge from the outside can really help in that. And I think throughout my early career, I kind of tuned that stuff out. I wasn't really into what we're doing right now, which is, leadership development and personal growth. I never was a person who jumped into that. And then, starting the company about 10 years ago, it was almost forced on you. Like, okay, now you're in a new role, in a new position, and a new journey on a new path. So you've got to get this stuff down. And so I started reading and started consuming. And that would be one thing. I would say, oh, if there was something, I'm going back in time and I meet the 21-year-old version of myself, I would say, hey, start reading things that are outside of your scope of understanding.
I love that because you try to talk to people like we're talking to people right now. You meet up with people through networking, and you try to steer them to reading more. Hey, there's this author here that talks about personal legend. There's this author here that talks about, self-awareness, et cetera, et cetera. And they are, a lot of people amazingly and disappointingly are too cool for school, I call it. They
Yeah,
just, they don't have time. I know it all. I got it. And I'm like, well, why are you struggling then? Because you told me you were struggling. So I was
I
just
was
giving you
too cool
advice
for
to go read
school.
stuff to help you be better.
Yep, exactly. And I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. It was a too cool for school mentality. And, I remember my wife at the time, had books, leadership books and different things on personal growth. And, I opened a couple of them up. I remember reading them thinking, this is just all common sense. And, this doesn't resonate with me. And, yeah, I immediately dismissed it. And I think, part of that is what you said. It's too cool for school, but then some of these books, podcasts, document, whatever they are, will meet you at the right time. Books will find you, or you'll find
Yes,
that book. And so I think that's it too. Timing's important. Timing is important. There are certain times in your life where you need this book or that book. And you'll get better at that if you start that process.
exactly. Exactly. Boy, I just had a thought in my mind that you have brought up. Oh, well, it just escaped me. It will come back in a second. So let me ask this question. What are additional thoughts and advice to share? You shared a lot about your life, a lot about STN, the Social Television Network. Are there any, in closing here, any other thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I think we talked about trauma, we talked about fear. And so I would sort of say, no matter who you are in life, no matter your age, race, gender, you're going to get knocked down. At some point, you're gonna get your butt kicked, and it could be multiple times. So understand that there's so much value in sitting with it sometimes. Some people want to ignore that emotion of sadness or anxiety or depression. Um, but once you're able to, and again, this goes back to just being comfortable, being uncomfortable, you'll be able to process your emotions in a way that aren't hiding from what's really going on. And that helps you with self awareness. It helps you with relationships. It helps you with growth. And it'll help you get back up faster. It'll help you pick yourself back up faster. So, with again, back to you're always going to get knocked down. There are things in life that may knock you down early and you're down there for a while. You talked about storms earlier. Like it may be, oh boy, this storm is lasting months or it's lasting years. And well, maybe it's because you're not in the mindset yet to be able to weather that storm faster, or your emotions faster or properly. And so, once you're able to do that, those storms just become much smaller and much shorter. And you're able to really focus on the things that you want to focus on, and knowing that you're going to get knocked down again, but you'll be able to pick yourself up that much faster.
I appreciate your words and love your words. Getting back to a few things now that it's come back to me, you had mentioned people grab materials and they think, oh, this is common sense. But here's the
Mm-hmm.
big rub: common sense is not common practice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Absolutely.
that's it right there. We know we shouldn't be smoking because it's bad for our health, or gambling because we don't have any money, or drinking because too much of it is too bad, but we do it anyways, and then there's consequences with that. So having that common sense to say there's limits is okay.
And having concepts thrown at you that, yes, you're familiar with, but then they become top of mind. And so when you're going through, your day to day, whatever it is, job, family, and you have some of the things that you just consume top of mind, it does allow you to be in a better position to see opportunities, or again, back to growth, be able to apply some of that stuff in real time. Where, yeah, if you read a book 5 years ago, it might not be top of mind. You may have had some of it stick with you, but if you're consistently feeding yourself, again, just, this is cliche to say or common to say, mental strength and mental health is very similar to going to the gym. Like if you're not going to the gym, you're going to you're going to lose some of that stuff. And if you're feeding yourself brain food consistently, you're going to be much stronger. So it is a manner of, are you doing it consistently? And then you'll be able to use it on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly. You talked about positivity earlier, and you're correct. What you surround yourself with, keep in the forefront, that's what you pay attention to. So if you wake up in the morning and you're hitting the news and they're talking about murders overnight, hit and runs, this bad happened, that bad happened, that's setting your tone for the day. So surrounding yourself, audience, with positivity in the morning, especially the first 20 minutes, is extremely important because it sets the tone. Some of the things I do, and I'm sure you probably do some similar practices, is I get up and I go right to YouTube and find like a positive message, an inspirational message. And then I just fill my brain up with all that. Then I get a power smoothie, fill my body up. And now I got a good tone flowing and going here, and I'm ready for the day. And then you mentioned rejections and failures. A philosophy that I practice when I get rejected for a relationship or a job offer, I just said, okay, that's just getting me to my better job, my better relationship. And I just keep moving on and don't take it personally. So,
Yeah, I think there's a balance between, you know, being positive, but then also being able to discern things and self-awareness. But look at those things from a point of optimism or positivity. You're not trying to fool yourself into thinking, oh, I'm having a great day, or or this is an amazing situation. But if you're primed at looking at it clearly from a point of positivity or from a point of optimism, you're not lying to yourself, or you're not masking the situation. You're able to discern it accurately. You're going to have a better outcome. Whereas if you approach it with stress and fear and anger, yeah, chances are the outcome is not going to be what you wanted. So I think there is this balance of being positive, but also being able to really understand reality and discernment.
how can people contact the STN, the Social Television Network, for questions, a tour, or to explore opportunities?
First thing, if you just want to be a viewer, the app is available. The streaming network is available to download on the App Store or Google Play. That's a great kind of starting point for everyone. I kind of recommend that. There's a ton of content on there. And again, most of it right now is, I mean, all of it is Arizona focused and Arizona based. So if you're an Arizona resident, you're going to find it highly valuable. If you are a business or a brand in Arizona and you're looking to do something with your leadership teams or with your employees that really give back to the community or really tell the story about your community impact, that's where we would set up a tour for someone to come down, check out one of the shows, check out the studio, and then really talk about what you're doing and what your impact is in the community, and then maybe how what you're doing can really help some of these other organizations that are dedicated to the same effort.
And I love your app. I've been on there, and you have a lot of things, like you said, a lot of content already on there.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is called Fortunate Failures.
Yes.
And I went through that, and there were some really good, all of them were great. Lessons learned, I call it.
Yeah, exactly. We've been talking
And
about this whole time. You're down, but sometimes when you look back in time, what was probably at the time the worst moment in your life sometimes ends up being the best moment in your life or the turning point in your life. And that's kind of what Fortunate Failures is all about, is having local leaders reflect on their journeys and go, wow, that moment at the time was awful, but I grew out of it. And if it didn't happen, I wouldn't be where I was today.
there you go. Now, is your website up, I believe, or you're getting an enhancement to it? Or
Yeah, we're really excited. So the new website launches early September. And I think if you go to our website now, stntv.com, it doesn't look like a media site. It doesn't look like the traditional local media site you would expect to see. COVID and the pandemic really kind of delayed our plans there, but we're back up and running, and we're excited. And so starting in September, the website experience will look more like what you find on the app. But again, with more context, written articles of all the great things that our leaders and our community growth organizations are doing in our community, and then opportunities for others to get involved as well. So the website experience launches in September.
This is Eric Sperling, the Managing Director for Social Television Network. Thank you so much for the conversation, your time, and the knowledge you share with the audience. You have a great rest of your day. Hang on, though. I would love to talk to you offline, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate it.
You are welcome.